Hello and welcome to English 2. I'm your online teacher, Miss Bear. We have been looking at Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham Jail. We have been looking at specifically rhetoric and how an author uses rhetoric to advance his ideas, to advance his claim, to develop those ideas and refine that claim. So today we are looking at paragraphs 19 through 21, and we're going to be looking at some of those ideas and how Dr. King has used rhetoric to develop his ideas and his claims. As always, I need to remind you that this is part of the Engage New York curriculum that was developed as a result of the new Common Core state standards that multiple states got together to develop. Now, what happened is a lot of states looked at those standards and said, well, those are great standards, but we need to refine some to fit the needs of our state. And they did, and Mississippi was one of those states. So when we say Common Core is the national standards that we had, but the Mississippi College and Career Readiness standards are very similar to those Common Core standards in the way that they're written and their context. And so even though this is a New York curriculum, it still works for the Mississippi College and Career Readiness standards. As always, I want to remind you that we will have an end of the unit task, and that task is to look at, my clicker's not working, to look at your notes and all of the reading that you have done for Dr. King's letter from Birmingham Jail, and to write a well-developed response to the prompt. Analyze how Dr. King develops and refines his claims to advance his purpose in Letter from Birmingham Jail. Today's agenda, we are going to be accountable for our homework. We will do a masterful reading. We will read and discuss. We will complete a quick write, and we will close out the lesson with a little homework. You can see the standards on your text on your board in front of you, as well as seeing exactly what we're going to be working with in Dr. King's letter. Again, it's paragraphs 19 through 21. Last night, you were supposed to reread paragraphs 1 through 18, and you were supposed to take out your, you're supposed to complete the argument delineation tool, and you're supposed to complete it. And so what I would like for you to do is take that out now, and I want you to work with a partner, and I want you to compare that argument delineation tool and discuss the central and supporting claims that you identified from paragraphs 1 through 18. Great job. We're not going to go over those, but again, like I've said in previous lessons, your teacher will have a model tool that they can compare your work to the work that has been done ahead of time, that they will know the right things to look for as they're going through to make sure that you're on the right track. Now, we are going to do a masterful reading of paragraphs 19 through 21. Before we do, again, you need to have your text out. And if you flip through and you look at paragraphs 19 through 21, you see in the middle of 21, you have one sentence that is in black, and then you have an entire section in red, and then it continues in black. And if you remember, I said that the text that's in red is not read out loud. It is not recited by Dr. King in his masterful reading. So you will need to pause when you get to the end of the sentence, that first sentence in in paragraph 21, and someone will need to read that red section and then push play again in your YouTube masterful reading as Dr. King reads his letter, and then you will stop at 29:49. You will start at 24:18. So if you'll make note of that, the teacher in the classroom will make note of that. I will pause here so that you guys can listen to Dr. King read that section of his letter. Great job listening and annotating your text. Now, before we move on, I need you to work with a partner, and I want you to reread paragraph 19 just 19, and I want you to annotate the text with exclamation points to note areas that remind you of earlier parts of the text. Great job. Let me show you some of the areas that I found and that I identified. And you may need to take notes because you may have some additional areas, but you might not have all of these. So I want you to make sure you have as many areas as you can that point back. So let's look at the board and so you can see. If you look at more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. You should have identified areas where Dr. King goes back and points to other parts of the text with those pieces and parts. All right, so now I want you to work with a partner, and I want you to determine the tone that King establishes in paragraph 19. So talk about that, and then we'll get back and we'll talk about that. But I want you with a partner to talk about that real quick. Good job. So the tone that he has developed is this idea of criticism. It's a critical tone through the words and phrases of negative connotations. And if you'll follow along on the board, you'll see King is gravely disappointed. The white moderate is the great stumbling block, implying that they are even worse than the white citizens counselor or even the Ku Klux Klanner. The white moderate prefers a negative peace. King describes the white moderate as acting paternalistically. King says the white moderate lives by a myth. The white moderate's shallow understanding is frustrating. The white moderate's acceptance of the African Americans' struggle to end injustice is lukewarm. So let's look specifically at what is directly quoted from Dr. King's speech in paragraph 19. This language is so strong and vivid, and he uses these specific word choices. Remember, we talked about how rhetoric is used to invoke a certain emotion and to show a specific way that they want the audience to feel. That is what Dr. King is doing with these specific words and phrases. And if you didn't identify these as helping establish that tone of criticism, then you need to write that down and make sure that you have that in your notes, because that is going to be some of the evidence that you will use when you are analyzing the idea of how Dr. King uses word choices or rhetoric to advance his purpose. So go ahead and knock that out, write down those ideas, and then let's look at a couple of other things before we move forward. Good job. All right, now let's look at the word paternalistically. How does Dr. King use the word paternalistically? What is the impact of that specific word? Good job. So the word paternalistically, just so you know, is a belief system in which a group of people in power treats those who are not in power as if they are children. Many white slave owners used paternalism to justify slavery in America. Believing that they were more advanced and developed than their slaves, white slave owners thought that they were taking care of their slaves and doing the morally right thing by treating them like children and ruling over all aspects of their lives as some fathers rule over their children. Although slavery in America had ended, some people in King's time still believed in paternalism. So I'm going to pause a second, and I want you to re-look at that question, and I want you to revise your response. So how does King use the word paternalistically? What is the impact of King's usage of that word? Great job. I loved seeing your revisions to your responses. Revision is such an important part of the writing process. So let's look at the response to the impact of using the word paternalistically. So King uses the word paternalistically to describe how the white moderate feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom. The word intensifies King's criticism of the white moderate for treating African Americans like children. Because paternalism was used to justify slavery, King's use of paternalistically shows that paternalism has still not ended, and white moderates are like slave owners as the Negro's greatest stumbling block in the stride towards freedom. This comparison makes King's criticism of the white moderates even more harsher. King links current white moderates with slave owners who had the power to set the timetable for another man's freedom and never would grant that freedom. With the word paternalistically, King echoes and emphasizes his earlier claim that wait has almost always meant never. This has the effect of intensifying his criticism of the white moderate. Okay? Good job. I'm glad you guys were writing some notes. I saw that happening. So now, based on what King writes in paragraph 19 about the white moderate, who or what do you believe is the white moderate? I want you to write the answer to that question, and then let's talk about it. Good job, okay? The white moderate is a group of white people who are not only opposed to civil rights, but they do not actively support them either. So it's that idea of being lukewarm, of sitting on the fence. They don't care either way. They just want to live their lives in their happy lane, or what they think is their happy lane, and nobody else affects them. But we know that all of this does affect. It affects us all. If you go back to the thought that when one person is, Dr. King's idea of that if one person is oppressed, it affects the entire community. It infects the entire community. So this kind of points back to that idea from the beginning of his letter. All right, now we have a couple of questions that I want you to work with a small group or partner, and I want you to write these questions down and answer them, and then we'll come back and discuss them. Great job. Now let's talk about the responses to these answers, okay? Or to these questions. In paragraphs 1 through 18, how has King described his addressee's opinions similarly to how he describes the white moderate's opinions in paragraph 19? The addressees, like the white moderates, want King and civil rights activists to wait for racial justice and to obey the unjust segregation laws. What is the impact of the connection King implies between the white moderate and his addressees? When King refers to the white moderate, he is also implying that his addressees are part of that group. King is indirectly criticizing the addressees by including them in his criticism of the white moderate. And lastly, what is King's claim in paragraph 19? How is this claim different from other supporting claims in paragraphs 1 through 18? And you can see that King's claims that the white moderate, with their shallow understanding and lukewarm acceptance, are the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom. The white moderate is the reason injustice has not ended. The supporting claim is different from the other supporting claims because here King is criticizing the white moderate instead of defending his actions against the accusations from his addressees, as he did in paragraphs 1 through 18. Now, I want you to pull out your argument delineation tool, and I want you to look back at paragraph 19 and record the supporting claim, evidence, and reasoning from paragraph 19. The teacher in your classroom may allow you to work with a partner or may want you to work independently. That is at the discretion of the teacher in the classroom. Good job. All right, now let's move on to paragraphs 20 and 21. With a small group or partner, and this can be the same group or different, however, same partner, different partner, again, the discretion of the teacher in your classroom, I want you to reread or scan over paragraphs 20 and 21 and answer the questions on the board. Good job. We're not going to go over all of these questions, but we are going to go over some of them. So, what supporting claim does King make in the first sentences of paragraph 20? What evidence does King provide to support his claim that the clergyman's assertion is illogical? And how do these examples relate to King's moral high ground in previous paragraphs? I would like for someone in your classroom to read these responses and also read the responses that you guys put on your delineation tool. Good job. Now let's look at the next set of questions. How does King define the myth of time in paragraph 21? And then how does the myth of time connect to the white moderate's lukewarm acceptance of the struggle to end injustice? And then what is the cumulative impact of King's specific word choices in paragraph 21? Let's do this just like we did the last set of questions. Let's have someone in the class read the response and read what they have as well as what's on the board in front of you. Good job. All right, now I want you to get your argument delineation tool and I want you to make sure that you revise it to support the information that you just discussed. Great job. Now we know it is time for our quick write. So I want you to get out a piece of paper. Again, you can use any of the tools at your disposal. Use your entire notebook, your entire binder, everything that you've done so far. And I want you to answer the question, how does King's new claim in paragraphs 19 through 21 refine his central claim in paragraphs 1 through 18? I cannot wait to read some of your responses. I'm so excited. All right, now before we leave for the day, I do need to give you a little bit of homework. So I want you to reread paragraphs 1 through 21. I want you to review your notes and annotations and your rhetorical impact tools in preparation for the lessons. I forgot to tell you, you have a mid-unit assessment. That's okay, you guys are prepared. When you are rereading, I want you to focus primarily on King's use of rhetoric and specific word choices. I want you to make sure you're annotating and adding to your rhetorical impact tools as necessary. Put as much information as you can, but here's the thing, guys, that you need to understand. Miss Hebert and the teacher in your classroom are never going to ask you to write blindly. You can use any of the notes that you've been keeping in your binder. You can use any of those previous quick writes, the information that you put in there, any of the tools that you have been filling out, all of that. The text, you've been annotating the mess out of your text. That is what's going to be important, and that is what is going to help you write your mid-unit assessment. And you know that mid-unit assessment is going to be a writing task, but you've got it. I promise you, you are prepared as long as you have been doing your work and following along. So, until next time, Happy learning.